Hello, knowledge seekers. In this episode of 20-Minute Books, we're discussing Saving Capitalism by Robert B. Reich, a profound analysis and reflection on the current state and future potential of capitalism. This book offers a sharp critique of the prevailing economic systems while simultaneously presenting an optimistic vision for how capitalism can be reformed to serve the common good. Saving Capitalism delves deep into the reasons capitalism is not working for the majority of people and outlines the pathway for transforming it into a system that upholds fairness and prosperity for all. At its core, the book addresses the growing inequality and the consolidation of wealth and power into the hands of a few, exploring how these trends can be reversed. Author Robert B. Reich, the Chancellor's Professor of Public Policy at the University of California at Berkeley, brings a wealth of experience to the table. Having served in 3 presidential administrations, most notably as Labor Secretary under former U.S. President Bill Clinton, Reich combines his deep policy knowledge with real-world experience to craft a narrative that is both accessible and insightful. Saving Capitalism is a must-read for economists, students of capitalist systems, and anyone interested in the mechanics and future of economic systems. Additionally, it serves as an essential resource for activists and individuals advocating for social justice, providing a well-reasoned argument and actionable solutions for creating a more equitable society. Join us in this episode as we uncover the challenges facing capitalism today and explore the potential for a brighter, more inclusive economic future. Saving Capitalism, for the many, not the few. Introduction. Discover the vital reason why we must rescue capitalism for everyone's benefit. Capitalism, the social beacon of many Western nations, emphasizing individual rights and championing free markets. However, a glaring issue emerges when we delve deeper into its workings. Does capitalism genuinely serve everyone's best interests? Unfortunately, the current state of capitalism seems to tilt the scales in favor of a select few, leaving the majority to fend for themselves in an increasingly uneven playing field. This exploration sheds light on the intricate mechanisms of capitalism, exposing the imbalances that have crept into a system originally meant to benefit all. It's a clarion call for renewal, urging us to rethink and restructure capitalism in a way that truly reflects the collective good. One of the core revelations here is the alarming trend where human well-being and health are often secondary to the sanctity of property rights. This stark reality unfolds in various dimensions, from the way our economies are structured to the legislative frameworks that govern societal operations. Take, for instance, the controversial maneuvers of Donald Trump, who, despite the facade of bankruptcy protections, made decisions that adversely affected countless workers' lives. Such actions not only highlight the disparities within the capitalistic framework, but also question the moral compass guiding economic decisions. Moreover, the narrative dismantles the common myth that an individual's compensation directly correlates with their worth. This concept, deeply entrenched in the capitalistic mindset, ignores the multifaceted nature of human value and contribution, calling for a critical reassessment of how we perceive and reward labor. At the heart of this discourse is a pressing concern for the middle class, a group that has endured the brunt of capitalism's shortcomings. For far too long, they have navigated a landscape marked by economic and political hurdles, signaling the urgent need for a collective pushback to reclaim fairness and equity. Through this journey, we are invited to confront the realities of our current economic system, questioning its ability to serve the broader spectrum of society. It's a compelling case for reform, advocating not just for adjustments, but for a profound transformation that ensures capitalism becomes a force for good, ensuring prosperity and justice for every citizen. Part 1. Unraveling the myth of free markets, government's crucial role. In every corner of the globe where capitalism reigns, defined by the sanctity of private property and the dance of supply and demand, there exists a common narrative that celebrates the idea of free markets. Particularly prevalent in nations with a conservative lean, this narrative champions markets unsullied by what's viewed as the heavy hand of government regulation. Yet, this perspective overlooks a fundamental truth. The concept of free markets is a bit of a misnomer because, at its core, the market's very existence hinges on the foundations laid out by government. The notion that government intervention only muddles market efficiency misses a crucial point: that governments aren't just players in the market game. They are the architects who design the playing field. The myth that markets can thrive in a regulatory vacuum crumbles upon the realization that every market operates within a framework sculpted by governmental rules. These regulations aren't just extras tacked onto the market, they're the essential cogs that keep the machine running smoothly, defining both the blueprint of our markets and the character of our society. Dive deeper, and you'll discover 5 fundamental pillars that uphold our capitalist system: property, monopoly, contracts, bankruptcy, and enforcement. Let's start with property, a concept that stretches beyond the idea of ownership. The rules around what can and can't be owned craft the boundaries of our market activities. For instance, while buying or creating something might seem to automatically grant ownership, laws, such as those limiting the possession of nuclear armaments or safeguarding intellectual property rights, dictate otherwise. Moving on to monopolies, we encounter regulations that prevent any single entity from holding too much sway in the market. These rules ensure that a balance is maintained, preventing the rise of uncontested powerhouses that could distort the market's equilibrium. Contracts emerge as another foundational element, serving as the glue that holds transactions together. In markets dealing with regulated goods, like pharmaceuticals or food products, contracts set the stage, defining the terms and conditions under which sales unfold. Then there's bankruptcy, the rulebook for what happens when debts overwhelm. It's an essential safety net within the capitalist system, outlining the recourse when financial obligations can't be met. Finally, enforcement stands as the guardian of all these rules, ensuring that the market doesn't devolve into a wild west of unbridled aspirations but remains a structured arena where fairness is pursued. Understanding these building blocks unveils the intricate dance between government and market, a relationship far more symbiotic than the champions of unfettered capitalism might have us believe. As we delve into America's economic framework, these insights lay the groundwork for rethinking how markets function and for appreciating the indispensable role of governance in crafting a fair, efficient, and truly free market. Part 2. The interplay of politics and property. Understanding ownership and monopoly in the modern world. In our society, property ownership is often touted as a cornerstone of freedom and prosperity. Yet, have you ever considered the nuances that come with the concept of owning something? Think about your approach to a rental car versus your personal vehicle. The difference in care and maintenance is stark, underlining a fundamental truth. Ownership influences our interactions with objects, whether it's a car, a home, or a piece of land. But when we dive into the debate between private and common property, things get a little more complex. It's not a straightforward matter of one being inherently better than the other. The crux of the issue lies within the context of these properties and the political decisions that underpin their governance. Essentially, the rules of the game for what can be owned, the conditions under which ownership is valid, and the duration of this ownership are all dictated by the government. Let's consider intellectual property as a case in point. The realm of ideas, inventions, and creative expressions presents a unique challenge. How does one claim ownership over something that doesn't physically exist? Drug companies, for instance, navigate this by securing intellectual property rights, granting them exclusive manufacturing privileges for their patented medications. Yet the power to decide the longevity of such patents rests in the hands of politicians. And in an ideal scenario, the government would balance these rights, to ensure that life-saving drugs are accessible and affordable for those who need them most. Unfortunately, reality often paints a different picture, with pharmaceutical giants leveraging patent renewals, even for minor modifications, to extend their monopolies and keep drug prices sky high. This dynamic stands as a testament to a troubling priority: private property rights trumping the collective welfare in the accessibility of essential medicines. The concept of monopoly operates within a similar political framework. Take Amazon's dominance in the American book market as an example. Its ascent to the top was fueled by offering consumers convenience and savings. However, Amazon's stronghold also equips it with significant leverage over publishers, as demonstrated in its 2014 dispute with Hachette, where it simply ceased the distribution of the publisher's books to negotiate more favorable terms. The determination of whether such a monopoly serves the public good or undermines it is inherently a political question. It's a challenge that unfolds in the realm of antitrust laws, which aim to protect market competition and, by extension, the interests of the public. Through this lens, we see a vivid illustration of how political decisions shape not just the landscape of property and ownership, but also the broader contours of our economy and society. Part 3: When the Scales Tip: The Wealthy's Advantage in Contracts, Bankruptcy, and Enforcement. In dissecting the fabric of capitalism, it becomes evident that the threads woven to form contracts, bankruptcy laws, and enforcement practices are dyed in favor of those with the deepest pockets. This systemic tilt raises questions about the fairness and equity embedded within our economic system. Consider the realm of contracts. Big corporations and affluent individuals have the clout to skew negotiations, pressing others into agreements that reek of imbalance. The leverage they hold isn't just financial, but is often manifested in the conditions they impose, such as mandating arbitration for dispute resolution. The catch: these arbitrators are generally chosen by the employers themselves, stacking the deck against employees who find themselves between a rock and a hard place, accept the skewed terms, or lose the job opportunity altogether. But the scales of capitalism's building blocks don't just tip in drafting contracts. They also wobble precariously in the domain of bankruptcy. Here, corporations and their wealthy captains sail in a different boat than the everyday worker. When ventures like Donald Trump's Trump Plaza in Atlantic City collapse, it's the workers who find themselves adrift, jobless, with no safety net in sight. Meanwhile, figures like Trump can navigate through the storm, shielded by bankruptcy protections that seem to absolve them of financial blunders and their repercussions. The disparities extend to the enforcement of laws as well. Armed with their financial might, corporations and the wealthy too often maneuver to weaken the mechanisms meant to keep them in check. A stark example of this is their lobbying efforts aimed at defunding crucial regulatory bodies like the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. Stripping such institutions of the resources needed for effective oversight essentially renders the laws they're supposed to enforce toothless, further entrenching the imbalance that skews the playing field. Through this lens, the pillars of capitalism, contracts, bankruptcy, and enforcement, reveal a grim picture of disparity. They underscore a systemic bias that curtails fairness, shielding the wealthy and powerful while leaving the average citizen vulnerable. This imbalance not only questions the integrity of our economic system, but also beckons for a reevaluation of the rules that govern it, urging a shift towards practices that ensure justice and equity for all, not just a privileged few. Part 4: Debunking the Meritocracy Myth: The True Value of Work in Capitalism. In the heart of capitalist societies beats the drum of meritocracy, the melody that sings, "You get what you work for." This belief, deeply ingrained in the collective consciousness, suggests that our earnings are a direct reflection of our skills and efforts. But is this really the case? Consider the experience of power plant employees contemplating unionization. Among them, One worker firmly believed his labor wasn't worth more than the $14 an hour he was receiving. He ascribed higher earnings to higher intelligence or better opportunities, like education, which he perceived were out of his reach. This anecdote uncovers a troubling aspect of how workers perceive their worth, attributing low wages to personal inadequacies rather than systemic inequalities. It's a lens that not only diminishes individual self-esteem, but also perpetuates a dangerous narrative that the wealthy have earned their fortunes purely through hard work and intelligence, attributing their success to meritocracy. But stop and ask, are the absurd earnings of the hyper-wealthy, like hedge fund managers pocketing billions, truly justified? The straightforward answer is no. The equation that equates a person's income with their inherent worth is fundamentally flawed. The variables of success extend far beyond personal abilities, encompassing factors such as inheritance, connections, discrimination, and sheer luck, none of which merit a direct correlation to personal value. If we were to measure income against the social value of professions, the landscapes of pay scales would look drastically different. Jobs in social work, education, nursing, or elderly care, crucial pillars that uphold the fabric of society, would command salaries that reflect their immense societal contributions. Yet, the reality starkly contrasts, underscoring the distortion embedded in the current valuation of labor. Moreover, the ballooning discrepancies in CEO pay further dismantle the myth of meritocracy. The gap between CEO and average worker earnings has widened astronomically over the decades, leaping from a 20-fold difference in 1965 to an astounding 300-fold disparity today. This surge isn't a testament to a proportional increase in contribution or value. Rather, it highlights the structural imbalances that favor the elite at the expense of the average worker. At its core, the narrative of meritocracy within capitalism fails to acknowledge the complexity and inequity of how value and worth are assigned in our society. It's a narrative that requires revision, one that respects the dignity of labor across the spectrum and recognizes that worth cannot and should not be measured by income alone. Part 5. The eroding influence of the middle class and the rise of the working poor. In the golden era following World War II, the American dream seemed within reach for many. Owning a house, having a dependable car, and bringing up a family were attainable goals for the common baker or mechanic. This period was marked by a robust middle class, empowered by a strong bargaining position that ensured fair wages and decent employment terms. However, as the 1980s dawned, this landscape began to shift dramatically. Household incomes flatlined, reflective of a broader trend: the diminishing clout of the middle class in negotiating for better pay and conditions. But what spurred this decline? At the heart of the matter is the eroding power of unions. Today's workers, especially those in giant retail chains like Walmart or in the fast food sector, lack the collective muscle that unions provide for advocating higher wages. With union membership in the private sector dwindling to less than 7%, the majority of workers find themselves navigating negotiations without a safety net. This shift has left them vulnerable to the whims of employers, stripping away a layer of protection that once fostered stronger labor rights. Compounding this issue is the specter of high unemployment, which has cornered workers into accepting lower wages, often without the cushion of severance pay, job placement support, or health coverage. This precarious situation further dilutes their ability to push for improved pay. But there's a deeper, more troubling trend at play: the burgeoning class of full-time workers who, despite their steady employment, teeter on the brink of poverty. This phenomenon challenges the common perception that full-time employment is a bulwark against financial hardship. Many companies, in a bid to enhance profits, have systematically reduced labor costs, leading to a steady erosion of wages. In 2013, a startling revelation emerged. A quarter of all American workers were in jobs that, even with full-time hours, yielded paychecks insufficient to lift a family of four above the federal poverty threshold. This grim reality underscores a critical challenge facing our society, restoring the leverage of the middle class and addressing the growing plight of the working poor. As the scaffold of our economy, the middle class's dwindling bargaining power and the rise in working poverty signal a pressing need for systemic change, a recalibration aimed at reinstating fair wages and securing the well-being of all workers. Part 6. The precarious decline of middle-class influence, a looming economic and political crisis. The gradual erosion of the American middle class's negotiating power, both in their workplaces and the wider economy, isn't just a distressing trend. It's a harbinger of deeper economic and political instability. The shifts in power towards major corporations and the wealthiest citizens have rendered the middle class increasingly impotent, marking a shift to an era of stark wealth and income disparities. Imagine a nation where the top 400 individuals command more riches than the combined wealth of the bottom half of the population. This isn't a dystopian scenario, but rather the current state of affairs in the United States, with the wealthiest 1% holding a staggering 42% of the nation's private assets. Yet perhaps more alarming is the concentration of political power, which has similarly nestled into the hands of the elite. Research by academics Martin Gillens and Benjamin Page unveiled a chilling reality. The average American's preferences barely sway policy decisions, outlining a democracy where influence is weighted by wealth. This widening chasm between the economic and political potency of the middle class and the upper echelons of society is unsustainable. From an economic lens, diminishing incomes among the middle and lower classes drain their purchasing power, striking at the heart of consumer-driven prosperity. But the repercussions extend beyond mere economic metrics. A systemic perception of bias, where the scales are eternally tipped in favor of the affluent, erodes the foundational trust that underpins the marketplace. When people stop believing that bending or breaking the rules is justified, even in minor ways, the entire edifice of the economy teeters. Transactions become embroiled in layers of legal protection, spiraling into a morass of distrust where deals are shackled by increasingly complex contracts. Yet, the stakes ascend from economic frictions to political ferment. History offers poignant lessons, such as the populist uprisings of the 1890s, born from grievances over rampant corruption and inequity. These movements underscore how concentrated wealth can translate into social and political upheaval, challenging the very fabric of capitalist democracies. In this light, the diminishing clout of America's middle class isn't just a challenge to equitable prosperity. It poses a fundamental threat to the stability and sustainability of the capitalist system itself. However, despite these darkening clouds, a pathway to rejuvenation remains. With thoughtful intervention and a recalibration of priorities, it's possible to reinvigorate the middle class, restore trust in the marketplace, and avoid the historical cycles of conflict that arise from unchecked disparities. The future of capitalism hinges on embracing this imperative for change. Part 7. Redefining the path to rescue capitalism, a new political force and corporate transformation. The unsustainable divide between the rapidly flourishing top 10% and the struggling bottom 90% in America signals a dire need for systemic change. The essence of democracy is at risk if the voice of the majority remains unheard in the corridors of power. So, the pressing question arises: how can we rejuvenate the economic and political influence of the middle class to salvage capitalism? A revolutionary step could be the inception of a new political party, one that truly represents the largest demographic in the country, those who feel so disenfranchised that they've become non-voters. Astonishingly, this party of non-voters outnumbered both major political parties combined during the 2012 presidential election, with only 58.2% of eligible voters casting their ballots. This proposed third party harbors the potential to reignite the political engagement of overlooked Americans, championing policies that foster the economic prosperity of the broader populace. Key to this vision is overhauling the current campaign finance system, which disproportionately amplifies the voices of the wealthy, skewing political influence. Furthermore, such a party could advocate for raising the minimum wage, prioritizing labor over creditor rights, and curbing the overwhelming power of Wall Street's behemoths. Yet, political reform is just one facet of the revolution needed to salvage capitalism. Equally crucial is the reinvention of the corporate entity itself. Today's corporate structure inherently favors minimizing average worker compensation to maximize executive remuneration. A bold corrective could be to directly link corporate tax rates to the pay disparity between CEOs and their average employees. The wider the gulf in compensation, the higher the tax levied on the corporation. This approach would not only incentivize fairer wage distribution, but also align corporate interests with the well-being of their workforce. Rescuing capitalism from its current trajectory demands an audacious reimagining of both the political landscape and corporate ethos. By giving voice to the silent majority and fostering a corporate culture that values equitable prosperity, capitalism can be recalibrated to serve its original purpose, promoting the welfare and economic success of the entire society. This journey towards renewal is not without its challenges, but it remains a critical endeavor for ensuring the sustainability and vibrancy of our economic and democratic institutions. Final summary. Central to the discourse of this insightful journey is an inescapable truth. The groundwork for markets and, by extension, capitalism itself is laid by government intervention. However, the prevailing economic frameworks, staunchly upheld by capitalist nations, disproportionately benefit the affluent at the expense of broad swaths of society. This imbalance has not only fueled rampant wealth disparities, but also significantly diminished the democratic influence of the middle classes, posing a profound risk to the very fabric of civil society. The critical takeaway from this exploration is a clarion call for a paradigm shift toward greater equality within capitalism. The path forward demands an urgent recalibration of the roles and rules governing capitalism, from revitalizing the bargaining power of the middle class and redefining corporate responsibilities to fostering political engagement among the disenfranchised. In essence, if capitalism is to endure and flourish, it must evolve into a system that ensures its rewards and responsibilities are more equitably distributed, thereby securing a stable and prosperous future for all segments of society. Thank you for joining me today on this journey of learning and discovery as we explored the insights of another thought-provoking book in our growing library of knowledge. If you've enjoyed our time together, please take a moment to follow our podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and share 20-minute books with other knowledge seekers. Your support truly means a lot. Don't forget to join me again in the next episode, where we will delve into another enriching book. Until then, happy reading and happy listening.